I want to talk to William. William, who is calling in from Arkansas. William, what's up?
Oh, it's supposed to be Alaska.
Alaska. Oh, you're right. It's AK. I never get calls from Alaska. Wow. See, I'm already notoriously bad with the state codes thing, but Alaska, that's like a new one for me. So thank you for correcting me.
Oh yeah, no problems. So I want to talk about the big lie, but I also liked the idea of a brain in the jar from the last caller. And if we ever get to the point where technology can upload our consciousness, hey, sign me up.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing with the mind-body problem stuff. We've talked about that on the show too, but I'm not an expert on that. So that's going to be, and to be honest, I don't think anybody knows the real answer to that yet. So we'll figure it out when it happens, I guess.
And my furthest expertise are shows about it on Star Trek.
Yeah, there you go. So the big lie, William. What? Yeah, go talk about that for me. What is that? What do you mean?
Yeah, it seems so weird, and I don't understand. Okay, so people are being lied to about elections and all that, and I know you can't endorse and talk about who should be with what as far as voting and all that, but when faced with the mountains of evidence, they're like, hey, let's just follow this pillow guy. That sounds cool.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot to say about this. People really don't want to be wrong, and they want to hear the people that they think feel the same way they do spoken out in in political avatars, right? Like that's part of the appeal to Trump's campaign was he was supposed to say the quiet parts out loud, right? He was kind of the person who was saying what a lot of people wouldn't never say in public, but he was saying live on TV every day. And that unfortunately has a draw for people. And Mike Lindell is in that same boat because he is also in that same group of people that's still hanging on to these election conspiracies, that's still hanging on to just a lot of these bogus ideas. And he is wild enough to go through with it. And so that kind of confidence is also really appealing to people because con men are confidence men. That's what the shortened phrase for con men is. They are people who are so confident in the BS that they're selling that you just kind of want to believe them. And Mike is totally an example of that. So yeah, I didn't think we'd be living in a world where the My Pillow guy is destroying the democracy of the United States. But again, it's 2021. It's anything's possible. Anything's possible at this point.
Anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd be living in a world where conspiracy theories are treated, in kind of like the higher echelons within, well, for lack of a better term, news organizations. Mm-hmm. You used to relegate those to, Discovery Channel when, right. ratings were down and all that, it's like, no, it's got to be the aliens or some really stupid garbage.
Right.
But how do we get there? How do we just poison minds so readily? Is it really just a matter of the technology was set up in at the right time in the right place, or, have we always really been there? And this is just kind of like, we just chipped away at the woodwork.
So Neil Postman talks a little bit about this in this book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, right? And so you could look at the history of mass communication and specifically mass media all the way back to the invention of the printing press to now, and you start to see a change in mainstream American opinions and attitudes about the media and its representations of what it should function as and what it actually functions as time has gone on. So pretty much ever since public debates on television between, you can look back to JFK and Nixon, and you start to see that public debate was one of the instrumental forces in the turning of that election. That's just the starting point of what would continue to be a habit of television portrayals of people actually influencing what people had to say. Before that, it was usually recorded speeches or newspapers that people were talking about. So you start to enter into the television era, and then eventually you get into a 24-hour news cycle. You have to remember that news used to just be during like daytime hours. It wasn't always a 24/7 thing. Now we have a 24/7 news cycle, and now we have people who are trying to condense their political messages into smaller and smaller sound bites until eventually we get to where we are now, where every single part of the web is now incentivized to have shorter and shorter and shorter content. Look at YouTube right now. YouTube, they have their shorts going on. TikTok is one of the most prominent internet platforms out there, and it's a 60-second platform that you get to talk about. So it's like, this is the result of we have a media diet that can be filled with all kinds of stuff, and it can come from all kinds of places. The other thing too is that news used to be controlled by a smaller group of people who had the resources to actually publish and get reach across out there. Now, Mike Lindell of the Pillow Company can talk to anybody in the country right now through their smartphones. And that wasn't a thing you could do like 50 years ago. So if you don't have a training in media literacy, if you don't have the right tools to recognize how news actually gets their sources, what that news cycle looks like, what that process looks like for gathering information and researching, then you're going to be totally lost as to who to trust and to what to recognize as good reporting and bad reporting. If your news is just coming from whatever's on your Facebook feed and you don't have a good process of delineating where those sources are coming from, then of course you're going to be skeptical. Of course you're going to be saying, well, I'm hearing people say this and people say that, because you don't have any way of recognizing what's coming from where. So I don't know, that was kind of a longer tangent, but there's a lot going into this. And that's a summary of why I think it's happening, I guess. Cynthia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I want to use a little bit of an antidote. Antidote.
Anecdote?
Anecdote. Yes.
Yeah,
I wanted to use a little bit of an anecdote.
Okay.
I remember.
I would like a conversation antidote as well. That would be nice.
We could do that next time. But one of the things that I remember, especially like coming into YouTube, because like, I've done other YouTube shows and talked a lot, especially about, politics and how politics affects different groups. And one of the things that I remember having to push back on with other people when they wanted to tell myself and my partner about, who should be on our show, who should not be on our show, who should we talk to, who should we not talk to. And one of the last things that was said when we were talking to a friend of ours about this is that he said, well, we want to make sure that we control voices because we want to create our own echo chamber. And that's when me and my partner and I was like, ooh. And I think that, we have communities, human beings, like we create communities, and oftentimes the communities are with people who are mostly look like us, think like us, talk like us. And so we happen to kind of like gather around information that kind of like tickles our fancy. And that's something that it's like natural, but it still can be dangerous. And the reason being is that I know for me myself that I have no problem with civil discourse. And I also want to believe as many true things as possible and not believe the things that are not true. So I am a person that I will turn on a dime if you give me proper evidence on why I should not, believe in such thing, right? But that's not the whole of society.
Right.
And the thing about it is that, like, as you mentioned, Dan, like propaganda has been utilized forever since we had any type of media source. You think about even like Hitler, he used propaganda in order for him to be able to galvanize Germany around the Nazis and their philosophies and why they did the things that they did,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like but the thing about it is that even like when you were mentioning about like how can you tell when a source is trusted or not? right? A
Mhm.
lot of people don't know how to tell when sources can be trusted or not.
Mhm.
Even like I remember like having back and forths with people who have a tendency to believe in conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And, my main question to them is, well, how do you know that's true? And then the answer to me is, well, you do your own research. And I'm like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. If you're making this claim that this is what it is, then you should be able to back up what you just said. And
Right.
unfortunately, we do have on the internet specifically a bunch of different corners where people can just vomit anything at any time. And as long as
Mhm.
they, make it seem as plausible as possible, people will believe it. And that's where
Right.
we are.
Yeah. Look at the Plandemic documentary, right? Like you have this slick Netflix style documentary that went around
Mhm.
Facebook and went around people's sources of information. And what did that do? That set us way, way back in terms of having trust for this vaccine. How many people today in this country are not getting vaccines because of that documentary? Got to be in the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah.
Has to
And
be.
if it's
And
even
and
one, it's too many.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that documentary had no right to exist. No right
Mm.
to exist. But we don't have laws in our country that are saying, well, you can't publish this because that's not true.
Right.
That's not a thing that we have. And I would say for good reason in most cases, right? Like we've seen a history of other countries trying to censor the public and censor media in doing a lot of shady stuff. But unfortunately, that also means that it's up to us in some ways to really counter the information that we see. So I'm with you, Cynthia.
Mhm.
Whenever I am encountering that, I try to counter it as best as I can. But I also recognize that that's a privileged position that I have because
Mm.
I'm like knowledgeable enough to be able to actually do the good research on it and to be able to talk with people about it and have the free time to even talk about it, even on shows like this one. So that's tough. And it shouldn't be up to guys like me or you or just the average person to be the forefront of countering what we're seeing today. But unfortunately, a lot of campaigns against trying to educate people against what the truth is just really aren't working or aren't working as much as people have hoped because it's just piling more. When we start to see companies like Google and companies like Facebook and Twitter that are marking things about COVID-19 saying, hey, this is questionable information, that is only making people even more skeptical
That's right.
because they're seeing that, oh, an algorithm is taking care of this. They're censoring us. There's something going on here. There's something more nefarious. So there's like this compound effect here going on that's very complex.
Mhm.
And I think that the sad thing is, I don't know if anybody has a good answer on how to solve it. I've looked at a lot of papers on this, or at least I've tried looking at stuff. I've tried seeing like what the top writers in the New Yorker and other journalists have said about this, and I don't know if anybody has the best idea outside of one-on-one conversations. But
Yeah,
it's scary. It's scary.
it
Yeah,
is.
that's one of the things because, like Cynthia was saying, trying to set up your own echo chamber, and that's bad enough as it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, how do you find a way to chip away at somebody else's echo chamber, not so that you can sway them, but so that they can then go look for reputable sources.
Mhm.
I know that, shows like this attempt to
Yeah.
do that, but it's hard to do that with a, 10, 15 or 20-minute call.
Right. I
One
know.
more thing I would like to say too, that those of us who happen to be non-believers also need to be better at having one-on-one conversations.
Mm,
I think that I've read a lot of different articles about the new atheist,
right.
and these are people who once they actually come to their disbelief, because and oftentimes it comes through reasoning, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, like once they actually have like these arguments down pat on why stuff is not right or wrong or why you are wrong, it's more of a, okay, I'm about to turn you around with my particular phrases, and I'm about to slam dunk you and tell you how wrong you are,
Right.
and point me, boom, I got it, right?
Right.
But
Right.
but it's not into, but that becomes disingenuous, because even on that online, you're not really trying to engage a person so that you can have a proper conversation and really start to examine some of the claims that they make. You're just like, this is wrong because of this is wrong because of this, and now you need to get out of my face, bye.
Right. Right.
So and that's why, and I understand that even times that, people go through their angry atheist
Right.
phase, like everybody
Right.
lied to me. But at the same time,
Yeah.
okay, once you get through that, we have to learn how to have better conversations with people.
Yes, absolutely. And computer mediated communication, right? Which is talking about comment sections, talking about any kind of text interface on the internet, is proven to be like the least effective communications in these kinds of conversations, right? There's documentation on that. Like there's definitely evidence that shows that one-to-one conversations with people tend to have more of an effect on people than those other forms of communications with the average person, right? Because you're able to get signals in communication there with other people that you just can't pick up on text. It also, when you're putting out an argument, like you're really thinking about how you want to respond back and less exactly about what the person is saying at the time too. Your defenses go way, way up when you see a whole block of text of somebody who's ready to fire back at you, rather than let a conversation go its natural course with somebody. So unfortunately, I think it does mean that we have to let go of our own assumptions and let go of our own sense of what we think is right sometimes when we do have our conversations, and just ask other people what they believe and why. I mean, really following a street epistemology approach and not letting our own biases get in the way and letting people figure that out for themselves. I know it worked for me, right? Obviously, I am an anecdote to that story, but like I didn't have a good epistemology on how to figure out what's true and what's not true. When I had my conversation with Anthony Magnaboska, I was 19. I was still trying to figure out life. And if I had come in today with the same mindset I had then, I probably would have been a very different person now, because I was working on a methodology that was culturally brought up into me through my church and through my community, and not through secular values. The things that, Cynthia, you were talking about this earlier. You're someone who values what you want to know what's true, right? Above everything else, right? You want to know what's true, and you want to try to figure it out at all costs. But that's not a value that other people have all the time. And if people don't have that value, then it doesn't matter how many facts you spew at them, because their epistemic worldview there isn't going to account for that as much. They may account for anecdote more as valuable to their experiences, or they may trust the people in their personal circle more, or the people they see on TV that they like more. So it's a complex issue. But at the end of the day, I am still an advocate for having personal conversations with people as being some of the best things you can do in changing people's minds, if that's your goal.
I second that emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people suck.
People do suck, William.
Yeah.
People do suck.
Yeah.
But people's all we got.
Yeah. And remember, guess what, William?
You're
Guess
right.
what, William? Guess what? We are people.
We people.
We people.
That's right. William, if you had met me 7 years ago, you would have thought I was probably the most annoying person ever. You would have probably disagreed with everything I had to say on the things that really mattered. But the fact that people were patient with me changed who I am today, right? And that's important. I think it's important to give other people that chance too, even if they're being really annoying about the thing they're talking about at the time. Because I know I was super wrong. And if you look at the comment section on when people talk with me, they weren't super nice about it either. But, it does take time. You have to be willing to give patience to other people that you'd be willing to give to yourself. But I don't know, William. I don't know if there's anything else we could help you on. Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to work on my street epistemology, myself, but it's hard.
I would say one thing that I really wish that was in schools now that could possibly help a lot of this that we're in right now is to teach reasoning and critical thinking skills to children. I would so love that, because if we start them out young, where we can teach them how to question things, how to look for sources for things, really help them in that particular aspect, then possibly when they get older, that, we're not going to be subjected to, uh, uh, what did I call him earlier, Dan? When you call him the pillow Mongol.
The mogul.
Yeah, the
He's
pillow.
supposed to be mogul. I did say
Right.
Mongol, but
And you said Mongol, and I called him Pillow Khan or or Genghis Pillow,
Genghis, something.
Genghis Pillow.
Genghis Lindell. I don't
Right,
know.
Genghis Liddell, But like if we had more relevant, curriculum that can really help, teach children critical thinking skills and reasoning, and they can actually take that into their adulthood, we will probably have less Mike Lindells.
I want to, this isn't a pushback, Cynthia, because I 100% agree with you. This is an addendum to your statement. Okay. Because when critical thinking means so many different things to different people,
True.
You don't see this as much today, but like there are textbooks that used to be published in the early 2000s of stickers on the front of science textbooks saying this book teaches evolution and you should be critical and skeptical of everything that it talks about in this book, right? Like you see versions of that in Texas and in other places, right? So like critical thinking or being critical can also have cultural connotations to it too, that you want to make sure, because what's critical to an evangelical is being critical of the secular world, being critical of what Hollywood tells you, being critical of what evolution says, right? So like being critical is not a neutral thing. Sometimes it does have these connotations to it. So like we have to be like, and I know this is what you meant. I know like this is what you're talking about, but we have to be extra careful that when we're saying we want to teach critical thinking, we mean back to the roots, baby. We're talking Aristotle, Socrates, and not just Western philosophy too, by the way.
Even though I personally, I do not like Aristotle. I really don't like that.
That's reasonable. That's reasonable. He had a lot of crazy things to say. But,
yes, he did. Yes, he did. But but I understand what you're saying. And definitely we don't necessarily want to make something like that so broad that people can kind of like misconstrued what critical in itself can be. Remember, we even have like this whole pushback about critical race theory just because of one dude.
I know. Oh my
just
God.
because of one guy.
I know.
Thank you. Fox News and Christopher Loco.
That's really weird. This side note, but critical race theory has been around for a while, and for some reason, it's absolutely blown up in the last year or two. I mean, obviously, I know why, but like, it's really just interesting. But yeah, what I'm thinking too is like the rising conspiracy party in this United States are the people who are saying, well, you guys need to be critical. You know what I mean? Like they're the ones who are saying you guys have had to be skeptical. And like, we don't even know what being skeptical means as a consensus in this country anymore.
That's true.
Which is wild. But yeah, you're right. People are afraid of critical race theory and other stuff. Yeah.
Indeed.
But anyway, William, that's a great call. Thanks for getting us on these tangents. Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, that pretty much clears everything up. Well, I mean, as much as it can be considering.
Yeah, for sure.
But thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you, William. Appreciate you calling in, and hope you have a good rest of your night. Yeah, I love it when people call about things I can't sufficiently answer to my own to my own standards, right? Isn't it frustrating?
Yeah, but it challenges your brain. That's not just in a jar.
Right. Or it is a jar, depending on who you ask.
Well, but if you call it a container,
could it be better
than a container instead of
possibly? I think so. But we should probably move on to a next call here.
Let's do it.